Michael, I want to bring you back in here. I'm aware that we did lose our feed with you guys for a little bit there. And we were going to bring you in when we were still talking about the economics and the growth aspects. And now you're coming in after we've spoken about the legal. But I still do want to get your perspective on, as a film producer, how do local film producers attract budget? How do they attract investment? And what are the logistics and the implications of everything that we've heard on local producers and being able to do that?
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, look, I mean, basically, pre-COVID, there was a huge new abundance of opportunity, which was created by this fight between the streamers for market share against studios, and then also a fight for all of those audiovisual broadcasters, basically against Facebook, etc., for people's eyeballs. So prior to COVID, there was already a ramping up of production. You could see studios being built all over the world. Right now in the UK, there's two being built, one in London, one in Liverpool. And COVID only has increased that because obviously more and more people are stuck at home and they're watching content. And I think there's even a shift of people, watching good content on their televisions and away from social media to a certain extent. So now, vaccine's been announced and hopefully it's going to roll out. We need to make sure that we're in the right place to take advantage of the backlog of production, which is going to have to come to fill the space that was lost while we were in COVID and while there was very little production going on. So we need to ensure that our policy, our legislation, our institutional environment is as good as it can be, that we're ready to go into this, because we need more of the productions that we've been doing, the Blood and Water, the Blood Psalms, the Trekkers, Queen Sono, Professionals, our Oscar or Lesotho's Oscar winner or entry, This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection. There are lots of productions going on which show the potential of South Africans to grab the market share, which is going to become available for everybody in the world to compete with. But we need to be hand in hand with government in creating an enabling environment, which, the previous speakers have talked about the existential threats, and these are extinction events. The copyright thing that Stephen was talking about, that is an extinction event. If that was put in place, we would have no access to that market share because we wouldn't exist. So the kind of things I think would really drive our economy, one of it is studios. There is a studio that's been in Durban, Video Vision have been developing for a very, very long time. If that could get going, it would transform KwaZulu-Natal and the Durban economy and the South African economy, giving a different node with a different weather system to Cape Town, where there is one. So I think that would be a great investment, and I think they're presenting it to the President's Investment Council. But I know there's another development in Cape Town, Temba Sibeko, with some partners, has got a studio which we've been to see, which I think would be a great addition to the existing Cape Town studios, because the new site promises a horizon line pool and a lot of different things which the other studio doesn't have, but also the other studio has been extremely busy, so there's definitely space for it. So I'd say that as a country, we have been incredibly blessed in terms of the founding legislation and environment that we're in, because we have an NFEF Act creating a funding body, which no other African country has, and only a couple of BRICS countries have. We had a tax incentive. It used to be Section 24F, now Section 12.0. Very few African countries, or no African countries, have a tax incentive for film, and very few BRICS companies have that. The rebate is a good intervention. We have broadcasters, both public and private. Obviously, we've got institutions like the IDC and the National Empowerment Fund, which not even the UK kind of has. I think Germany has similar kind of state banks, but that's it. And then we have a regulatory authority, whether it acts well or not, and we have the potential of lotteries to give money. So those are all the positives that we have. Government has put in place a legislative and an institutional framework, which is positive. Now we need to talk about how do we get the legislation to be the best for the industry right now. And I think one of the things highlighted is that we do have, the positive is that government is obviously very animated about the sector, and that's positive. So as a result, we have this Department of Arts and Culture Audiovisual Reference Group. We have the South African Cultural Observatory Creative Industry Sector Master Plan, which is feeding into that. We have the Department of Small Business Development Creative Industries Master Plan as well. The DCDT, Department of Communications, Digital Technology, Audiovisual White Paper. And then we've got the NFF has a new council with a new CEO. We have ongoing discussions with the DTI, and we have the copyright legislation, the FPB. So everything is hitting us at once. And I have to say, it's been very good that the IPO, which is our industry body, has actually completely transformed and to meet this challenge by ensuring that this year in our ExCo, we have a majority of Black ExCo members and 50% women, which we're hoping will ensure that in terms of our engagement with government will see us as a representative body of all producers and a trusted partner in going forward to work out what that should be. And I've just got a couple of anecdotes about how legislation was developed in the past and maybe mistakes that were made on both sides, which we need to overcome. We need to learn the lessons of the past and we need to move forward. So one of them was, for instance, when Section 24F became Section 12.0. Essentially, we had been following the UK legislation. There was a tax incentive in the UK. The UK changed its legislation. South Africa, the Revenue Service felt it should do the same. So suddenly it said to us, okay, industry, let's talk. And the thing that was put on the table was a legislation similar to what they have in Jamaica, which would never have worked. And Jamaica doesn't make any films. So we clung to saying, well, let's just at least do what the UK does. And then when legislation was put in place, Revenue Service, there are obviously some hawks in the Revenue Service who just put a little clause onto it, which said that you couldn't borrow money to invest in and get an income tax deduction. And that little clause meant that particular section, that particular act became completely useless because it was not something that we had workshopped with Revenue Service. We had not been part of any of the discussions. It was just something entered at the end, and it rendered it impossible to use. And I don't know anyone who uses it. But another issue around that was, the borrowing money. Anyway, there is another problem with that act, which is meant that it's redundant, and we've got to try and make sure that acts and legislation are actually fit for purpose. Similarly, there's been ideological approaches to acts which now need to change with the time. So, for instance, the National Film and Video Foundation Act provides for 75% of its money to go to the industry in the form of grants to produce content. And that's the kind of content that I'm talking about, the writers and directors that will create the next Peter Jackson, the next Taika Waititi, the next Gavin Hood, Neil Blomkamp, who will bring production back to us, like District 9, like Eye in the Sky, and will increase our power in Hollywood and our ownership. Now, for a long time, for good reason, when the NFF Act was implemented, the administration felt that, well, we shouldn't be giving 75% of our money away to the industry because the industry is white and the industry is not going to help us transform. We must use as much of that money as we can internally to empower our own Black citizens. And that was correct. In my view, in hindsight, that was the right way to go. And so a lot of people came through the NFF who then became producers, became distributors, Black people, and grew our Black companies. But now, 26 years later, it becomes more appropriate to go back to that founding legislation, which was modeled on the Australian legislation, and say, okay, well, now it's actually time for 75% of that money to go to the industry, because actually the industry is now transformed and it now has a majority of Black people, etc. So we've got to review this legislation and make sure that with producers, and since now we have SASFED, which is a constituency-based organization, we have the IPO with its representativity now being majority Black and 50% women. What we're saying to government is we're ready to engage. We're a bit overwhelmed by the volume that we have because we're all volunteers, but we really want to sit down and make sure we get this right so we can really take advantage of the abundance of opportunity that's coming our way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.